There was a little bit of a confusion on my part about a missing speaker, but I'm happy to know that Mana is here. Mana Tahaie is the director of the YWCA, and she's here to talk about reflections on 5 years of eliminating racism in Tulsa, what they've learned at the YWCA about race, racism, identity, and racial injustice. Please welcome Mana Tahaie.
So Holly asked me to go on TV for this, and little does she know I finished my slides about 10 seconds before walking in the door today. So here goes nothing. So our mission at the YWCA is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. I was hired as the first director of racial justice at the YWCA in 2008, and so tonight I wanted to share some reflections with you from our staff, our program participants, our speakers, and other people whose paths we've crossed over the past several years. Race isn't real, but racism is. Race isn't a biological or genetic truth. So really, race is something we made up as a social construct, but it's still intensely relevant and very, very real, and has very intense impact on people's lives every single day. This is really disconcerting not being able to see what slide is up. Great. Okay. Prejudice doesn't tell the whole story about race. One of the speakers we had visit us early in my career was Dr. Ron Walters, who's since passed away, and he said, prejudice is not liking someone because of the color of their skin. Racism is not liking someone because of the color of their skin and having the power to do something about it. That's what we're talking about. We discovered that a lot of us were taught from a very young age to avoid talking about race. Either we were shamed for noticing that someone had different skin color, or we were told that we should be colorblind, or that it's not polite to bring up race in mixed groups. The impact this has had is creating a communal paralysis around race. When it comes up, we experience anxiety, confusion, frustration, and a host of other unpleasant sensations, and so naturally we want to get the hell out of that conversation as soon as possible. But it turns out that not talking about race doesn't get us anywhere. I really wish that we could pause the slideshow. So we figured out we needed to find another way, one that gives us permission to have direct conversations about race. This meant we needed to let ourselves off the hook for being unprepared, or for being raggedy, or sometimes even hurtful. It also meant that we had a lot to learn, and we needed to make space for that learning, because after years of not practicing any moves, you can't expect to be a star in the championship game. We also discovered that we all had a lot of baggage when it came to this discussion, and that was keeping us from being honest and real with one another. So we did something counterintuitive. We developed separate spaces for white people and for people of color to deal with that baggage, to develop the language of race, and to learn the tools for racial justice, and it changed how we operated completely. Oh, we're way ahead of the game. I'm just going to power forward. We're just going to do it. So one of the things we learned, and an example of one of the things that we talk about a lot in our white anti-racism groups, is the concept of colorblindness. There's a book called Witnessing Whiteness that they use, and it explores ideas like saying, I don't see race, is really sending the message that I can't see racism. The author of that book says that people say we're colorblind, we can convey that we are not prejudiced, that we're against racism, that we don't make judgments based on skin color, but what we are also saying is that we believe a person's racial placement and their experience in the world isn't real. The people of color who hear this get the message that when they hear, I don't see you as black, or I don't see you as Mexican, or whatever that happens to be, they hear, I don't see you. I'm overlooking that character flaw of yours. And it turns out that's a conversation killer rather than the opposite, which is what people are usually going for. We learned that intent doesn't matter nearly as much as impact. That however good our intent is, it doesn't make up for how something lands, whether it's something we do or something we say. We used to hear a lot of, well, that wasn't my intent, when someone shared that something was hurtful, until we realized that doesn't mean we weren't responsible for the impact of our actions too. We learned that none of us is immune from this disease, this thing that is in our culture and in the air we breathe. We're good people, really, all of us. We work hard at our jobs, we love our families, we volunteer, and we strive not to judge one another. But that doesn't inoculate us from the one-dimensional negative and harmful messages about race that permeate our entire culture. We're all conditioned to think about different people of different races in certain ways, and often that conditioning is really invisible to us. It impacts our decision-making, our relationships, our institutions. And this includes people of color who internalize negative ideas about ourselves, leading to self-doubt and self-harm, both individually and collectively. I have to pause and say that we're sitting on hallowed ground tonight, in an area once populated by the wealthiest African Americans in this country before they were massacred and run away by their neighbors. This history is uncomfortable, but that doesn't make it irrelevant. The events of our past, be they the Trail of Tears or 1921 or Japanese internment or any other horrible event based in racism, shapes who we are and how we operate today, and we learned we really need to acknowledge them in order to move past them. One of the other speakers that has visited Tulsa, Joseph Montville, says, "Time doesn't heal wounds, only healing heals wounds." We also learn that we're often talking past each other. One result of this history is that it shapes us differently depending on where we stand and where we sit, both individually and as a collective. And as a result, we can have really different perspectives on the shared experiences, and that means we often talk past each other. So it reminds me of when this land illuminated the history of Tate Brady, whose name is enshrined in the district we're all sitting in, and there was a lot of confusion about why his legacy even mattered. And a lot of us missing one another, as people coming from different places couldn't fathom how anyone could see anything differently from the way that they interpreted those events and that history. So for this reason, one of our core goals of the YWCA is cultivating empathy and humility. The understanding that we don't have a monopoly on the truth, and the ability to truly listen to someone else's. Let's skip ahead a little bit here. We also learned that white is a race too. We often think of race only when people of color walk into a space, forgetting that whiteness is a race as well, with its own identity development, its own social and cultural cues. The difference is, in our culture, whiteness is normalized, and therefore it's made invisible. Think about Band-Aids that are colored in flesh. What this also means is that white folks aren't often thought of as part of the solution, which is really detrimental to our work in racial justice. We've learned that this work is a process, that the system of racism took 400 years to develop in our culture and a lifetime to develop in ourselves. And so the process of eliminating racism is going to take time too, but the rewards are so incredibly worth it because this is life-giving work. One of our contributors said, when you have open dialogue about difficult racial subject matter, learning, healing, and unity can occur. And it's nice to know that we're on this journey together. Another one of our participants said, people are dying to talk about race. This is so evident. The pretend game that it doesn't exist or it's not a problem is detrimental to really getting to know one another. When we don't pretend that we don't notice, relationships can become deeper and more genuine, and we can learn and laugh together. We all have a part to play in this. We learn that we're really in it together, that building up community is key to know that one is not alone. And finally, my favorite quote is that not only do I have a voice, but it is powerful. When I let go of my fear of conflict and actually use it, injustices seem to cower away. And I think the most powerful thing we've learned at the YWCA is that we need to transform this conversation that we've silenced for so long around race. We need to learn to use our voice, as unconfident and as raggedy and as afraid as that voice might be, to use it and direct it, use our collective force toward the elimination of racism by any means necessary. Thank you.